show, and this is my research paper, The Two-Way Street Between Real Science and Science Fiction, Biotechnology's Influence on Sci-Fi Films. So for my introduction, I want to talk about why my research would be a gap in the field. So there is already existing research available on sci-fi technologies and their impact on society. So how science fiction films create these perceptions for public about technology, such as how they instill fear or how they instill admiration for them. So there has been experiments done on children in the United States in this specific school where they showed children a movie called The Core, which is about the Earth and its inner workings, and it talks about how children, when they watch this movie, they kind of get the wrong perception about science itself. And there's also been research, which is actually my anchor paper, research done by looking at media, which is specifically newspapers in Australia. So they I can't remember her name, sorry, but she looked at 6 newspapers and she was able to identify stem cell research specific wordings and analyze whether these are positive, negative, or neutral, and how they impact society's perceptions of stem cell research. There's also been research done on the sci-fi's potential impact on the real science industry and the real biotechnology industry. For example, people think that Star Trek actually influenced the development of human-computer interface in real life. And there's also been research done on the accuracy of science fiction films and again how they lead to different perceptions of science technology. So why I picked science fiction and biotechnology is because undoubtedly science fiction films have gained a lot of popularity over the past few years, including films like Martian, Star Wars, etc. And also because biotechnology is also on the rise with stem cell research, cancer cures, etc. And I'm also curious about why there seems to be a difference of opinion with the two industries, because people tend to admire science fiction films, but they tend to fear real science and real biotechnology. So my research question is, through a correlational research, to what extent have advances in biotechnology industries in the United States between the years 1970 and 2015 influenced the design, creation, and use of scientific technologies, specifically genetic engineering in science fiction films? So why I decided to pick the USA and not any other country like Singapore is because the USA is currently the world leader in biotechnology, and I thought this would be a great location to get a lot of information. And as you will see later on, I use only public biotechnology companies because private companies are not they're not forced to reveal information about their revenue or about the work that they're doing, whereas public companies are, so it's a lot easier to find information on that. And I do understand that a limitation of this could be that in the biotech industry, a majority of the companies are actually private, and very little of it, maybe 20%, are public, but since this is the only information I could get, I decided to go with it. So the purpose of my question. There has been a lot of research done on the impact of science fiction films on the biotechnology industry, but there hasn't been any research done on the impact of the biotechnology industry on science fiction films. So I want to see whether the science fiction film industry and biotechnology industry could possibly be dependent on each other for their innovations, for their inspirations, and since the one-way street has been done, I'm hoping to find research on the other street. So the method that I decided to use is a correlational retrospective study, and retrospective means that you collect data that is already existing from the past before today, as opposed to prospective where you collect data for the years to come. And correlational is obviously between the two industries. And these are some of the factors that I'm considering, and this is like all the research that I'm collecting. So for example, the funding for the two industries by the US government or by other companies, and the number of biotechnology companies versus the number of science fiction films through the years, or the revenue of the biotech industry and the science fiction film industry. And I hope to, but the black ones are all quantitative information, whereas the last two are qualitative. So this is what I will be doing by myself, which is percent scientific accuracy of the films that I've chosen, and the measure, if possible, a measure of the positive or negative reaction towards these films. So what I hope to do once I've collected this information is create a graph or a table and hopefully show that there's a correlation or lack of correlation between the two. And I also picked 15 films that were based on they were the highest grossing films of that decade. So for example, the 1970s has 3 films, 1980s 3 films, etc. And one of the films is primarily about genetic engineering. One is primarily about cloning, and one is primarily about bioterrorism. And finally, with the help of my statistics teacher, I will be doing a null hypothesis and using p-values to determine if there is sufficient evidence to show that the biotechnology industry has actually influenced the science fiction film industry. So some key terms that I will have to define is biotechnology, just because there's so many different variations of it, and I thought this one was the best one, taken from the New Zealand technology curriculum, which is biotechnology influences the use of living systems, organisms, or parts of organisms to manipulate natural processes in order to develop products. And some other key terms that I'll be defining is IPO, which is initial public offering, which is the first sale of stock by a company to the public. And I'll be also having a lot of economic terms, I guess, just because I didn't know them myself before I started doing this research, so I felt like it would be important to mention them for anyone else who doesn't understand them. And bioterrorism is the deliberate release of viruses, bacteria, or germs used to cause illness or death. And the null hypothesis, as I mentioned before, is a type of hypothesis used in statistics that proposes that no statistical significance exists in a set of given observations. And I hope that as I go along my research, I will have more key terms to define. And my working thesis includes my hypothesis, which is that the rise of the scientific plot in film must have been influenced by changes in the growth and mindset towards science in society. And although sci-fi films are often ahead of the science industry in terms of the design and creation of technologies, they were initially inspired by ongoing technological and scientific advancements. So when we watch films, we often see technology that we're really inspired by, that we really admire, and even though they don't really exist in real life, my hypothesis is that they were initially inspired by real-life technology. So this is some of the research that I have already collected. So I can only take a little snapshot of it, but it starts in 2015 and goes all the way to 1970. And so for example, I have the number of biotech companies and the number of biotechnology patents and the number of sci-fi films. And on this side I have inflated adjusted gross revenue from sci-fi films and spending on research and development. So I hope to create graphs with this. And another limitation is that sometimes I can't find information on it, so I just put not available over here, but I'm still trying to find if there is possibly still research out there. And this was also another research data that I collected. So this is the NASDAQ Biotechnology Stock Index, and this has been collected since September 1993. That is the last date possible, so again, that's a limitation because it doesn't go all the way from 1970. And here is Sony Pictures stock. So this is one of the stocks that I'll be looking at, along with Time Warner and Universal Studios and things like that. And another limitation of this is that, I have a lot of limitations, but another limitation of this is that we can't say that the rise in this is because of a science fiction film. I mean, for all we know, it could be because of another film. So I'm trying to work around that with my statistics teacher. And I think I am done. I had more.
Questions for Apurva? Go back to Alice.
So my question was, would the scientific technologies that you're talking about that were influenced only include genetic engineering, or would they include others? And
I'm deciding to focus on genetic engineering, cloning, and bioterrorism because I feel like these are the topics that are more prevalent in movies right now. Like, when you have a movie where a virus comes and destroys the world, that's a type of bioterrorism. So I'm hoping to focus on these because there hasn't been enough research done on them, but there's been research done on stem cell research, HCI, artificial intelligence, and things like that.
You stated that you wanted to look at the % scientific accuracy of movies. How are you going to do that? What
Well,
numbers do you need?
Well, my anchor paper actually has a method where the person who wrote the anchor paper is very good at biotechnology, and so she obviously knows what is true and what is not. But I'm hoping to just pick one aspect of the movie that I believe is not correct, and find evidence to disprove what is in the movie. And then, although I might not find a percentage, I will find qualitative data to show that the movie may not be as accurate as we think it is.
Okay, so you're not putting a number on it.
I hope that I could put a number, but if I'm unable to find a method where I can actually quantify that, I will just write it in paragraph form that this movie was not accurate because of this.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Sure.
No, I already asked my question.
Okay, sorry. My concern is there seems like there's a lot of data that you're collecting, and it seems massive. Matter of fact, my commentary is that there's so much. My concern is it too much? You need to wean it down to something more focused. That's something just to think about in the future. Other thoughts? Okay, thanks very